Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today, my good friend Binji. He is the head of collective engagement at OPTIMISM. For people that are unfamiliar, tell us what collective engagement is and how you got into this Web3 space.
Hey y'all. So collective engagement is all about like how can you bring various different citizens, companies, and people together to kind of like form a cohesive story and engage as a broader collective. So this delves a lot with like how our narratives are pushed out publicly, how like we interact with our community, how we do certain events and on-chain activations to get like the user, the developer, and the big companies that are built on top, like in our case, the Superchain, to basically be able to engage with one another and like be work in cohesion across this like movement that we're all seeking towards, which is scaling Ethereum in this case. So I'd frame it more so as like almost a role that will help decentralize a collective by bringing the collective's different pieces together, mainly on a public-facing realm.
I definitely want to get more into the Superchain, but real quick, how did you get into this on-chain world, this lifestyle? Everyone seems to have an interesting path here.
Yeah, so mine was pretty wild, I'd say. It was by force. I lived in a separate country, and there were money transfer issues when I live in Costa Rica. And the only way for me to get any way to live was actually through Bitcoin. And this was some like various different routes through which I would get this crypto, which would then be sold obviously for coconuts, etc., because I had to live. But that was my first round with cryptocurrencies. I was like, okay, cool. Like at that point, I was like pretty young and I just needed money, so it wasn't a big deal for me. And then I got into trading in 2017. I was on Bitrex, lost a lot of money. Trading's not my thing. I still try sometimes, but not my thing. And then around 2020, as a student at Northwestern, I studied economics and cognitive science. And a lot of that went into the realm of behavioral economics. And what fascinated me about behavioral economics was incentives run the world. Money is the biggest incentive. If you can program money, you can program the world. And like that is what drew me towards Ethereum, which had this vision and these like philosophical writings, like things like Meditations on Moloch by Siddhartha Codex. I started reading a lot of these like crypto philosophy texts, and I got red pilled basically. During that point, I wanted to kind of work in tech generally, but I didn't want to be a consultant. That was what that was a path that I was headed towards. A lot of people in universities do go that route, and full respect for it, of course. But like I want to do tech, and I want to do product management specifically. So started interviewing for various different product management jobs. Coinbase started their first associate product management initiative that same year. I'd applied for that, luckily got in, and I started my career at Coinbase, where I was an associate product manager doing international homepages and site conversions to onboard people into crypto. Then I moved to OPTIMISM, where I've been ever since. It's almost about 3 years, been a basket of different roles, happy to talk about any and all of them. A lot of learnings down the way, but it's been a great experience so far. So that's it's a little TLDR on my story.
And let's imagine somebody stumbled upon this podcast for the first day and they don't actually know what OPTIMISM is. Give them a quick, rundown on what is OPTIMISM and what's the goal of OPTIMISM as it currently stands.
Yeah. So OPTIMISM is many things. If I were to sum it up, OPTIMISM is a movement that is scaling Ethereum. It is scaling Ethereum through the utilization of an open source stack, like a blueprint that allows people to build blockchains called the OP stack. Now that blueprint is completely open source. We have almost about 50% of all rollups that are live, all layer 2 blockchains that are live are using the OP stack. And that's an open resource. So that's one thing, right? OPTIMISM is a movement that pioneered the OP stack, a framework for building blockchains. And on top of that, it's building what we call a superchain, where blockchains that are leveraging the OP stack can join this movement through OPTIMISM to build a superchain. This is an interconnected web of blockchains that are all working in unison to scale Ethereum together. And it's kind of this idea of like OPTIMISM is a movement to expand the pie to scale Ethereum. The superchain is a movement to scale the block space and like work together and have shared network effects and have shared standards. And at the end of the day, like what it means is, how do we make Ethereum so scalable both in its values and its tech through various different blockchains that are all connected with each other, so that apps can be built on top of these blockchains and users don't have to worry about blockchains anymore. It's almost like users will just have awesome apps. App builders will just be able to leverage cool things from one chain and another chain to kind of like work together to build something like a super chain, right? Like a super app. And that's our hope. And that's what we're all pioneering towards. So far, there's like multiple different chains that have launched. Some of the more recent ones is Unichain by Uniswap, Kraken's Ink chain, Coinbase's Base, which is the biggest rollup on chain currently, as well as like teams like Sony, Moj, Shape, Zora, and a host of 26 other blockchains that are all leveraging the OP stack that have committed to the Optimism superchain.
Well, fun little tidbit for people. I just wrote Gelato's announcement about the Kraken new L2. So talk to him a little bit about, I'm trying to think what other episodes we talked about the superchain. I think Moonwell, people can go back to that episode. They can go to Soon's episode where they're talking about SVMs, but talk to people that are unfamiliar with like, what is the OP stack? Like, why do we need this like interoperability between L2s and the ability to easily like create an L2?
Yeah. So I on a personal note, I remember in 2021, there was a lot of this talk about like cross-chain, right? Like the future is multi-chain, the future is cross-chain. And I personally love that idea, right? Like if you are cross-chain, it means like there's a roll-up here that may be focused in one part of the world, another chain here that might be doing its own thing. And now as an app builder, I can access communities from both. That's awesome. That's just like expanding the scope and the TAM of any given app and any given use case. Loved it. But when we look at that practically, and what ended up happening is all of these different chains in this multi-chain world used a completely different stack. That meant different code, like different VMs. That meant different integrations, right? Like maybe you integrate with Etherscan on one thing, the other chain uses something else like Blockscout, and it's just like all these things. What ended up happening was all these ambitious teams building multi-chain apps basically had to churn a lot of things because they were spending an egregious sum to integrate across these different blockchains. With the standardization, with interoperability, an app developer can just build on the superchain and instantly in an interoperable future, get some of the amazing on-ramps that Inkchain and Kraken's going to provide, some of the amazing Uniswap liquidity that Unichain's going to provide. And their users and the builders themselves don't have to worry too much about the chain. They're just worried 100% on building the app itself. If we can abstract, like we talk about chain abstraction on a user perspective, if we also talk about chain abstraction on a builder perspective, where builder can literally just be like, I'm going to build an app where I can get the best distribution. Perhaps one of the best distribution points will be the superchain because it has like all of these different big chains that are connected to each other. So it all feels like one big chain. And like, that's kind of part of the philosophy behind what we're building. The reason for picking the OP stack as well, like long-term, and I think some of the reasoning that a lot of our partners have given is the fact that it's extremely resilient code. It's been battle tested. It has core developers. So it's not just being built by OP Labs. It actually is being built by all of these different core developers as well. So it's like the mind share of the number of people working on it has increased almost tenfold over the past year. That's one. The other is the fact that it's open source. So like, it's auditable, queryable, et cetera. It is also something that we've seen a lot of teams pick. So like Coinbase, et cetera, they do a lot of due diligence, obviously, when making a decision. They've picked the OP stack. They're contributors to the OP stack. And it's this big movement of just like a bunch of different developers and core devs building this future together. And some of the developers, they come from the Ethereum Foundation in the past. Like they, the talent and display has been really, really incredible. And like honored to even be able to speak to some of these folks. And they're very accessible. Everything is done in the open. You go to specs.optimism.io, you can follow through. Everything will be open source forever. We believe in the idea of like expanding the pie. Like there's teams that fork the OP stack. That's okay. Like let's expand this whole thing, right? Join the superchain has its benefits. And yeah, that's some of the reasons I'd say on OP stack, superchain, why interoperability matters. Access to devs, feasibility and ease for devs, access to distribution, and resilient open source stack code.
So for one, it makes it very easy to create interoperability, easy to build. And then for like a very practical, maybe on the trader perspective or the DeFi user, it's like, you'll have these issues where you're like, oh, I have like $5 on Base. I have like $100 on another chain. I got on Unichain, I got this or that. And you're just like, well, how can I like roll up all of that money without like bridging it? So like, I think you guys have some interesting things like USDC everywhere. So talk to them a little bit about like some of the like tangible benefits that actually accrue to these companies for being within the like Superchain ecosystem.
Yeah. So let's see. There's a couple things, and I'm just going to list out some names and some items. This is very subjective take as both like an enjoyer and a user. I wouldn't say it's like an official benefit that I'm giving to everyone. But okay, let's see. One is you can just launch like that, right? Like you don't have to spend. The biggest benefit of doing an L2 versus an Alt L1, by the way, is this idea that you don't need to bootstrap a validator set. That's very expensive. That's very capital intensive. With layer 2s, you can just literally like one click deploy these things. They're great. There's all these integrations ready for you because everyone's already used the OP stack. Build on Bitcoin. It's a team leveraging the OP stack. They are using Bitcoin. They're trying to bring Bitcoin on chain, right? Like, but they've got the OP stack and instantly they're integrated with all of these amazing Ethereum tools. That's kind of like an immediate benefit that I think people undersell in a way. But it is very powerful. Like how quickly can you go to market with your app chain, with your rollup, etc. So that's number one. I think that's like a big benefit. 2 is the shared network effects when you join the Superchain, right? Like when you join the Superchain, you're getting, there's a pool, I believe, of 500 million OP in airdrops for all users, devs, etc. 800 million OP in retroactive funding, so that you tap into that source. You also tap into shared upgrades and shared pushes. So OPTIMISM mainnet OP mainnet is on stage 1 decentralization, Base, etc. are moving on the path towards getting there. And it's because of the work that's been done by the OP stack and the general foundation, right? And Kraken, when Andrew was asked why Kraken picked OP, one of the things they said was that like they don't have to worry too much about like the heavy protocol stuff because that's just going to happen and you can just build your ecosystem. What we've seen in rollups in the past is rollups have been built by very, very technical teams because it was new. But now when you have the tech done, you can have very business, ecosystem growth, community-minded teams come in and build, which just opens the scope of how rollups act and how people perceive rollups. And like, you expand the pie in that way as well because you have different voices speaking the language. Another benefit is definitely around the idea of these like shared campaigns and shared initiatives that we do. So like we love the arts, Superfest, Sunnies, retro funding, airdrops, all of these things. It's like, okay, how can we actually like move all together as one and do these like big pushes? And this also translates a little bit into like how we kind of like can organize events and spaces and all of these other things like reach our communities and interpopulate across the communities. Now, this is all benefits to the platform. I want to dive a little bit into users. Like if I'm a user of the Superchain, why would I care about this? If I'm a user of crypto, why would I care about this? 2 things. I think one, it solves one of the harder problems in the space, which is like, I personally have like my balance in 10 different chains, God knows where. I have no idea what any of that is. It's hard to track. I have to use this like portfolio tracker, and it's like some absolute mess. If you do more than like 5 transactions a week on chain, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like it's a lot, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and this allows it all to feel like one experience. If they're all interoperable, if they're all kind of like in one spot. And that's not just because liquidity flows in and out in an interoperable future, but it's because the community does too, right? Like a tool that's like a space or like maybe a community that is a power user group of Base, for example, can easily become a power user of Inc. or Unichain, because it's all like you can kind of have these like shared communities kind of all be wrapped under the Superchain vision and like feel like they're a part of this one whole thing. When you bridge, etc., it happens like immediately. I mean, it doesn't even feel like bridging in a pure interoperable future. We're looking to launch Super C20s, which basically mean like your asset when you deploy on one chain, it just is available everywhere. It's like the everywhere asset across the Superchain. Now users can be like, let's say there's a token on Base. In an interoperable future, that token can perhaps be like used on a DeFi protocol on Mode. Like those sort of things can be pushed and created, so users have no friction. The last thing I'd say on like user specific thing is it just expands the pie of the types of apps that can be built. Right now, like a lot of apps on L2s have been L1 apps that have been moved to L2s. So it's like similar things. It's just a bit cheaper. It's a bit faster. Of course, there's some innovation on top, and it's been awesome to see. But it's like there's a fundamental constraint of the ecosystem that you're in. Like I'm launching on X chain. X chain gives me this marketing support. they give me this like tooling, they have this kind of culture, and you're kind of like, you're stifled in a way by it, like you're stuck there, right? Like if the ecosystem has something happen to it, like it's hard for you to kind of move away from that culture. But now you can build like these like cross-cultural apps immediately and completely reinvent the idea of what an app even is. Like, you don't have to think about like, I have to target this and have to do this activation campaign. You can literally build a complete novel thing. So an example, this is just a throwaway example of mine, is like, obviously Pump Fun is massive, right? That's a clear thing right now. It's one of the largest revenue generators of crypto. And let's see, like Goat was something on Solana that like became pretty large. The AI thing, it was there. The thing with this is that you are limited by one ecosystem and its tools when you do something like that. If this was to happen in a Super C20 future where there's an app and a multi-chain app, maybe a multi-chain launchpad through the Superchain, for example, then you can have like these launches that can immediately be utilized by app developers, users across various different segments, right? Like, for example, the on-chain developer kit that like Coinbase has is really awesome for AI, like on-chain AI kit. That can only be utilized in the OP stack right now. So in a Super C20 future, it doesn't matter where you were to launch a protocol. You can leverage these tool sets being built by Base, being built by Kraken, being built by others on top of the Superchain. So it compounds pretty heavily.
Yeah, and for people that are unfamiliar, maybe I'll just create an example out of the blue. So we're going to create Jack's chain. I can go to something like Gelato. I can pick a framework like OP Stack. I can pick the settlement layer, the data availability layer. Boom. Now I'm pretty much within like a few clicks in the OP Stack. And you talked a little bit about like marketing campaigns and kind of this benefit that accrues to having everyone in the ecosystem. Talk to us a little bit about like how Optimism is like helping developers and like promoting growth within the ecosystem. You talked about like shared campaigns. What else do you guys do? Like there was I know you guys do retro grants. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think what's really exciting about like how Optimism can shape these programs is that Optimism isn't here to shape them alone. It's here to either, okay, for example, in the form of Superfest, it's here to shape them in the sense of like, hey, like Superchain, let's work together. Let's put out this DeFi initiative. Let's work with all these DeFi apps and like create a really fun user activation. So that's one way, right? Like this, like kind of like direct with like perhaps the Optimism Foundation engages with some teams and like works with other chains to pull this off. In another sense, it's with the community. So with retro funding, for example, with governance grants, for example, anyone can go and join the Optimism DAO. Like literally anyone. You can go and you can find your path towards allocation and you can have voting power within the DAO. From there, you can shape how the DAO actually utilizes its funding, which is a lot of OP. I don't know exactly off the top of my mind. But that's a way in which like Optimism 1 will continuously work across the Superchain to bring out like interesting activations. It'll consistently do airdrops. It'll consistently do various different types of funding. But it also will listen to you and it'll also listen to ideas and it'll also like enable people to create their own paths of funding. And I think that's like the superpower here. If like as governance matures, what I would love to see personally is like, okay, we're not here to tell devs what to do. We're here to listen and then create the frameworks for them to succeed. And I think that is like the winning scenario in crypto. I think like a lot of times what we've seen, and for it to be real with like the state of this industry right now, it's a lot of like telling developers like, come to my hackathon, come do my thing, come do this bounty, I have this idea, you got to do it. And it's just like when we look at the most successful protocols in crypto, they're contrarian to begin with. So what if you can actually empower and enable developers to create their own grants programs, to create their own bounties, etc., such that you kind of like make people in your ecosystem feel like, oh, these guys believe in me. And I think there's like a lot of paths there that can be explored. We've been doing a lot of things with Bounty Caster, et cetera, as well, to kind of like really work with the community and build with the community, not just for it.
And then you mentioned Sunnies earlier. What is it? The Sunnies?
Yeah, so
if I can even call it those Sunnies.
Yeah, it's the Sunnies is basically a. It's almost, you can think about it as like a retroactive reward system that has marketing built in. Like it's on-chain Oscars, right? Like teams basically have submitted their contract data, et cetera. We have an open source dashboard that we're constantly improving and iterating on so that people just get free data. Number one benefit, you sign up for the Sunnies, you're going to get free data. That's for sure on your protocol. Number two is an award show that happens at the end where it's like, okay, like let's reward the people who've done different things, right? Not just the people who have the highest TVL, but the ones who like have grown the most, the ones with the most users, the NFT artists with the most mints, the NFT artist that has like had the most interactions on their projects, like things like that, like various different like celebratory awards. Kind of look back and be like, wow, the Superchain is this whole massive thing, and let's celebrate the people within it and who've been building it from day one. So it's one of those ideas. It's a way in which I think personally, it marries grants and marketing together. And I think that's something that's historically been separated, where there's like grants programs, people get the grant, and then it's, okay, I have the grant now, I built the thing, but now what I want is distribution, and what I want is visibility. So what if you can actually have a grants program with marketing built in? Then the experiment that comes out in this case is the Sunnies.
And have you guys run the Sunnies before? Is this a new concept, or?
It's a new concept. We've had I personally worked on a couple of things within Optimism, within these initiatives. The largest one pre the Sunnies was We Love the Art. What that is basically another version of a grant program with marketing built in, right? It's like we gave a certain set of OP to artists across crypto in this competition. We had judges from all across crypto and outside crypto as well. All working for free, by the way, all working because they care about it, and all working because they see the blockchain as a place to actually like help artists get funding. And I think that's what we want to move towards, similar with the Sunnies. So we have done these sort of like large campaigns before. And if you look at Superfest, for example, that's a DeFi oriented one, more on the user side. But the Sunnies is the first time we're doing like specifically this concept. And the idea is like we want to move into a world where we're not like stagnating on like the types of approaches in which we're working with our developers in our community, and instead iterating and learning from the community, building with the community. If you look at the Sunnies, it's very much like built with 8-9 different teams across the ecosystem, and it's not really the central force guiding it. There'll be plenty of updates about it shortly. So.
Yeah, well, we're excited to keep abreast of that. Now, one of our friends of the podcast, Andy, he always talks about like, where are the apps in crypto? So we've talked a lot about, infrastructure. Talk to us about how we can start getting like, everyday people on chain. What's your thought about where it goes? Is it like, hey, my mom's going to be joining Warpcaster, or is it like, hey, stable coins are just going to get everyone in? Where do you see like actually people starting to come on chain?
Yeah. So I've had this long held belief generally on having built apps in the past outside of crypto as well, that the most successful applications do a couple things, or one, or at least two out of the things on my list. One is cut down time to do something. If something reduces my time to do a certain action, I'll probably use it more, right? Like you can extrapolate this and be like, Facebook cuts down the time for me to get in touch with people across the world. I'll use Facebook. Two is it creates a meaningfully novel social experience. So if I'm actually like able to meet new people or like do something new, or create a new community or join a new community very effectively, that's one thing. Three is if it allows me to do something that previously was impossible, right? Like, so like if it's, for example, I can't send money across the world, like stable coins have a great PMF there. That's something I would say as well. Now, and then four being largely like, is it fun? Like, I think that kind of couples with the social side. I think one of the reasons why we have not hit maximum escape velocity on apps is because of a couple things. So one, when it says like, it lets you do something faster. That's just not the case for crypto right now, right? Like it's very, very hard to onboard into this space. Still, it's gotten significantly better. Like, don't get me wrong. It's been incredible. Passkeys are awesome. Like account abstraction's awesome. It's gotten a lot better, but it's still it's still a grind. For example, like you could log in through passkeys onto a PWA, and that makes it very fast, but you still need to seed your account through a Coinbase or something like that in order to get in. I think there's some things that are being worked on there that I know people are using Apple Pay now, and I think that's pretty exciting to see. But so one is like, okay, we need to still really focus on making sure the number of clicks that it takes for a user to get on chain is reduced as much as humanly possible. And I think the number of clicks metrics makes a lot of sense. Because it's just intuitive. It's like, okay, let's not get people to do too many clicks. Anytime I'm advising a team or working with a team, it's like, let's reduce the clicks as much as we can. Like if we feel like there's too little clicks, like no, let's reduce them even more. People don't want to click as the drop-offs are huge. So that's one thing. The second thing is there's been this is changing. And I think that I'm happy that this is changing. And I don't want to sound too pessimistic here. I generally think this is like this next year is going to absolutely like change everyone's mind on crypto apps. Is that the contrarian developers have not gotten enough resourcing from ecosystems in order to build out what they want to build out. Ecosystems have fallen into consensus mode where it's consistently giving out grants, etc., and incentives, etc., to the same people over and over again. What that has led to is like this part where, okay, it feels like it's only like these 3 or 4 types of apps that can exist in crypto. So like people have given up on apps. So what have they done is like, okay, maybe more infra would solve this. And it's like this investment in infra and that like this distraction away from apps. What I'm excited for is just like seeing more contrarian bets be taken by VCs and grants and ecosystems alike, because that's where I believe that's like an unlock. There are incredible developers that need more like time in the day to kind of like be able to build out their ideas. One thing that I find really interesting is the transition from .xyz to .fun. I think that's like one thing where crypto is inherently fun. Like I think if people remember a lot of things with DeFi Summer, etc., it was weirdly like it was a fun, engaging experience. Like, and I think things like that, like even like when you go into Discord, like when you go on Moonwell, when you go in Belgium, like when you go into some of those rooms, it's like it's fun, right? Like there's a lot of people making friends and talking. So I think that's like a nice transition as well, where we're like, okay, we are building these awesome protocols and apps, but we're also building it for a community and we're building it for people. So I think teams that can harness and apps that can harness that energy of like, wow, this is actually fun to do, will succeed pretty well. And then lastly, like with everything infra tech wise, it's getting a lot better. We have kind of scaled this tech immensely so far over the past 2 or 3 years. I was looking at a comparison video of doing a transaction on chain like 3 years ago versus now, and it's quite impressive how much has changed. So looking good for the future of apps, but I think it needs a deep, hard look from like, where is funding coming from in the ecosystem and how contrarian are we getting and how open are we to new ideas and how much support is actually being given, where we're not just meeting KPIs, but we're expanding the whole idea of like what can happen on chain.
I got to say my internal is always that I'm a bit pessimistic on new ideas. So I'm much like these VCs. I remember tweeting when I was reading the A16Z builder report, and they were talking about like 10% of builders are interested in social media. I'm like, social media? There's only like 4 successful social medias in general. So I'm definitely, in that camp. But you mentioned a few interesting things that I'm very bullish on. I've written docs on this, is how we make crypto more accessible. So you mentioned account abstraction. You didn't mention intents, but I'm sure that's in there. Like there's gas abstraction. Of course, you can go back to the Moonwell episode. Talk to us a little bit about some of the strides we've made and which you think are really going to be impactful in like bringing in ideally 1 billion users into crypto.
Yeah. So I can start off with like the OG, I think, is like the account abstraction world. Like that was an amazing initiative across like the past 3 years of just 4337 and Yoav Weiss, etc. Just like really pushing that forward. It's amazing to see that momentum. Just let's make wallets easier. I think that's like a really quick one. So that's a big one, right? Like I think like smart wallets coming out and getting more usage is great, because that not only allows for an everyday user to onboard into crypto easier, but it also allows increased programmability of wallets. So like as you get more advanced, you can be able to like do things like session keys and limit orders and things like that. Session keys are fascinating. It just like will reduce your need to click a transaction every time. It's great for gaming. So that's one thing. I think like wallets, 4327, that whole movement, SecP 7321. I'm probably forgetting. That's the passkey one.
Yeah, all good.
These names are difficult, but those are awesome. And I think that's really like pushed us forward. And I'm excited for more and more innovation on top of those. Again, like having a smart contract wallet just means more programmable wallet. That leads to more innovation because it's more programmable. It's not just in a box. So that excited for that. The other ones are things like intents and some of the ERCs that has gone out as a result of them. I'm blanking on the numbers right now, but Across and Uniswap have put out a fantastic one. Skeletor, who's a developer, has put out another incredible one. It's this idea of like shared standards across intents. Like we can have intents, we can have these different, like everyone's doing bridging, but unless we have a shared standard to connect even the various different bridging solutions, then we end up in fragmentation, right? Like we don't want to end up in a world where like everyone's doing interoperability that eventually leads to more fragmentation. That just doesn't make sense. So I'm excited for some of those ERCs. I think that's like a big push for ensuring that we can all like benefit by like building these awesome like bridge interoperability solutions, but Ethereum as a whole can benefit because it's all connected to this like bigger ecosystem as opposed to being in silos. So that's one thing as well.
And if people are interested in the wallet abstraction conversation, they should go to the Infinex episode, probably go to Arcana, and I'm thinking about, there's definitely some episodes we've done on Intents. They can go to Enzo, but essentially Intents are this idea that like users describe an end goal and they're not like, well, first I need to bridge to this, and then I need to swap, and then I need to do this in order to stake in Lido, and then I get back this token. So essentially just saying goals like end states, beginning and end states, and then let the infra figure it out for us. Now, I'm very curious about what do you guys think is the future for Ethereum itself, especially in this like modular thesis where you've got like the OP stack. Is it like, hey, Ethereum's just going to be a place we like settle transactions, or maybe it'll be a data availability layer? Where do you think like is ultimately the relationship between Optimism and Ethereum 3 years in the future?
Yeah. My opinion, Ethereum is a summary of its layer 1, all of its layer 2s, and its superchain, right? Like when we think of the superchain, it's not, the world today is not about like Ethereum killers. It's about, and killing Ethereum. It's about actually giving Ethereum superpowers. And the superchain is a great vessel through which we could do that. You can almost think of layer 2s as like BD arms, marketing arms, etc., and of Ethereum. And that's kind of like completely where we've had from the very beginning. To give you like some definitions of optimism, what it means for Ethereum, etc. The quickest way is that like optimism is Ethereum. The superchain is Ethereum. It's all like for Ethereum, and it's continuously advance for Ethereum. I think there's like a lot of dialogue currently of like where do L2s fit into Ethereum, etc. And I think a lot of that will change the second the blob market changes, and like that's going to be very obvious. That, like, okay, like this is, and we're like very close to that already. In terms of how Optimism wants to fit into this vision, so the clear goal for us is for Ethereum to reach internet level scale. We have realized Ethereum has first realized one chain is not enough. One layer 1 is not enough. You need layer 2s. So, okay, we're in at layer 2. We've realized that in order for us to really hit internet scale, not just in like how much transactions can we fit in this box, but like how far can this box even be distributed, you need multiple chains working together. You need like shared standards for those chains to be working on. You need interoperability that allows these network effects to be realized. For us, that comes to life through the superchain. And I guess like a definition of the superchain you could think of as Optimism governed blockchains built on a shared standard code base that are unified by the OP stack and security, protected by the Security Council of the Optimism Collective, and works to scale both like Ethereum's tech and its values. It's kind of bringing all of that together. Optimism in this reality is more than one single chain. It was initially just OP mainnet, but it's now the steward of the superchain, right? It's a steward of the OP stack. It's kind of led to like Base, Unichain, WorldCoin, Inc., Sony, and like various other teams now joining, right? And like this doesn't only mean the chains. I think it means the apps as well, and we'll see that a lot more of that in 2025, especially as we dive into that world. What Optimism's job is in this realm is to basically provide the tech and governance to keep the superchain running. It basically empowers every other team that views the OP stack and joins the superchain to just go off and build an ecosystem, not have to worry about a bunch of other stuff, and know that their assets, their users, and their communities are safe. The idea kind of like distinguishes a bit. Like, people are like, oh, like there's Kraken, there's Coinbase, these are competitive, right? Like, what are they doing? Why are they both in the superchain? The idea is like this whole pie is so tiny. Like there's 8,000 developers in crypto. That is nothing, right? Like how for us to even hit any sense of like maximum capacity, get new people, get new ideas, for this thing to actually scale to the world of which all of us want it to, we need to cooperate, right? We can't be fighting over this pie. So we're playing this positive sum game together with all these different teams, some massive Fortune 500 companies, some awesome indie devs who are launching chains left, right, and center, and like some cool novel mechanics within it. About 50% of all like layer 2 transactions are using the superchain currently. I believe like app TVLs in like 4 billion or so. And we obviously have this governance system as well. So that's kind of like a general overview, I'd say, on like what this Optimism world looks like moving forward, is like stewards of this big new internet that's being built. A quick takeaway I'd say is also if you think of like a decentralized internet being created, what that leads to within this context is a decentralized internet that is scaled by multiple different entities, so like Coinbase, Sunny, et cetera, like Shape, Zora, different chains, all different personalities, all different types of people, all different types of users and builders, that is governed by you, that is governed by like anyone who wants to come and have a say into the decentralization of the internet and the future on-chain internet, right? Like on-chain's new online, etc. It's like, imagine we could build these standards that will protect the users no matter what, and users will have a say in it, even if it's being built by like the biggest corporations in the world. That's kind of part of the dream. It's like where we're heading towards, which I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, it's a very exciting to hear what you said there. Is like, we're really not competing against one another in the space. I remember having a friend who he had a business that helped gym scale, and they had a massive exit. But he was telling me, he was like, yeah, gyms, like, they don't really compete against each other, despite what they might think. He's like, they really compete against the couch. And I feel like that's the same here. I don't know what our couch is, but we're not competing against one another. There's another alternative that's just like easier, unfortunately, and we'll get past it. Now, one of the things we talked a little bit about was like apps and ideas. We always like to ask people on the podcast, what do you think is an area in the Web3 crypto ecosystem that you feel like is a good idea for a startup, or is not like necessarily getting its light in the sun? Like, we've had people be like, unified dashboards, that's a thing we need more of.
I love this question. I am always, for anyone listening, if you ever want to reach out and jam on ideas, like, that is what brings me the most happiness. Like, it's awesome. So thank you for that question. Okay, I have a couple, so I want to say the one that I think I'd love to see like right away. ZKTLS is fascinating. It basically allows for off-chain data to be utilized on-chain, right? Like, for example, I can do an airdrop using ZKTLS to everyone who said Binji on Twitter since March 2023. Pretty exciting, cool. Like, that's just one part. I can also do that to people who've listened to my best friend on Spotify. I can also like combine. So how can we actually like almost like vampire attack Web2 by using Web2 data, bringing it on chain, and then creating a reward mechanism for it? And what I say is mechanism, not just a static reward. Especially the mechanism is important because what it does is people are used to just like, we are spoiled, right? Like, we've been getting airdrops, we've been on chain, we've been just like, it's a weird world. Like, no one else outside of the space will believe that it's real. But if you can give them an initial thing, right? Like, if you can actually run that successfully, like, let's say, for example, every single person who has completed more than 100 like full cycle rings on their Apple Watch, so it's like you've hit your activity thresholds, whatever, is eligible for an initial airdrop of something, right? Of something that's utilizing LS, et cetera. I don't know if Apple data would be applicable here, but let's just pray, right? Okay, now they have it. Great. They can opt in to a mechanic through which they can continuously mine this currency by hitting certain goals continuously. So what that does is it creates this complete novel way of mining, right? Like, it's proof of work without compute intensity, and like without using computers, but more so like you're mining by working. I think that's a really interesting way to like, one, nerd snipe a bunch of people in the Web2 world and create reward mechanics like loyalty points, but way better because like loyalty points right now operate in silos. You can actually create interoperable loyalty points that changes the game entirely. Like, you can actually build like a really interesting open app, and that's one of the advantages of the space, obviously, like open standards. And I'd love to see that. I think Steppen was pretty fascinating in some ways as like a mechanic. It did get Sybil, so you have to be pretty careful about that. But I think we're at the precipice of like this novel realm where utilizing something like ZKTLS, going and targeting consumers outside of crypto, this onboarding thing will be faster and faster. Wallets will be easier and easier. Scale will be better and better. Gas abstraction is just going to exist. We can actually get a shot to do these novel experiments all together that get complete new people into realizing, wait, like, crypto at the end of the day is an incentivization vehicle, and I can build like incentivization tools for anything in the world. And that's going to be a very interesting unlock. Another thing really quickly is just like the on-chain AI agent stuff, like specifically with TEE stuff. What does it look like if you can actually let like an agent completely have like, one, be trained by a group of people so that people can actually vote for what the agent is trained on and the parameters for it, have multiple agents in that realm, and just let them off and free into the internet. then you can use TE for that. So that's pretty exciting as well. I'd love to see those interventions come to life.
Yeah, it was so interesting. I was working for, or I still work for Zero Gravity and a few other agent, people could say people enabling on-chain AI, and you would write or at least I would write these articles about like AI, agents of the future, AI agents of the future, and it was only within like the last like month or two that you really started to see like actually agents come on chain and be very interesting to like people that weren't just interested in like infra or like really complex DeFi stuff. Yeah. So very excited on.
I'd love to add this thing on like. I think the reason why that's happening now is the time to experiment has reduced significantly, because now like the thing is the tools exist now, like TLS exists, TE exists, fast onboarding exists, L2s exist, like Superchain exists. If a developer's like ambition, this goes back to the contrarian thing of like, if we invest in more contrarian folks who are trying new things and give them a chance or a pathway to do it, the tools exist for these novel experiments to like come to being that will nudge some complete net new people into the industry, which then makes the industry even stronger. So I'm really, really excited for that. I think with the AI stuff, it's become really abundant that like there's been so much thoughts and like thought pieces about it, but someone just went and did the thing and then it became the thing. And I think like the age of doers is nigh, and like that's what's really going to take us to the next level.
Yeah, and me and my roommate were talking about this. We're both, I'll call ourselves non-practicing engineers. So I used to work at Google. He used to work at Discord and Airbnb. And with the advent of like Cursor, like obviously Copilot was nice, but like Cursor and all of these like different AI coding tools, like it made coding fun again. Maybe just when you work for big tech, it doesn't feel as fun. And then when you do it for yourself, it's fun. But like I suspect we'll just keep getting more projects because of the rapid iteration cycles for coding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then talk to us a little bit about like some of the upcoming milestones. You talked a little bit about like the Sunnies. You talked a little bit about some of the upcoming things that OPTIMISM has going on. Then tell us some of the things that you're looking forward to as well.
Yeah. DevCon, top of mind. I'm booking my hotel and everything right now. So I think what I'm very excited for is this world in which Ethereum is truly coming together. And I, having worked at a layer 2 protocol for like almost 3 years now, will be the first to say that, not the first, but like we'll definitely be open to saying that like, because everyone was so busy on the research side, there were times where we weren't able to like really go out to the community together as one Ethereum, right? Like as like one big Ethereum movement. We're ready now. And I think that's going to be glorious. I think that's truly going to be something that everyone who has been contributing to Ethereum, a fan of Ethereum, will see. And I think that's going to really inspire confidence, especially as app builders and crypto attention grows in general, that this is an ecosystem which is here to like fight past things and just get better and work together and is welcoming and has all these awesome people building on, for, and with it. So that's one thing I'm really excited for. I think DevCon is going to be really awesome as a showcase of that. Another thing I'm excited for on the optimism front is just like we got all these different chains that are moving into stage 1, which I think is really exciting. We got all these different chains that are moving into governance, which is really exciting. We're having a lot more chain delegation, et cetera, in governance. If you look at the forums, that stuff is really cool because that goes back to this idea of like, we're building this internet that you have a voice in. And I think as you see these like big forces join, like that voice becomes more and more powerful. So that's very exciting to see. Apps. I think there's like one big part here where the app ecosystem is getting a good refresh generally, because I think more protocols, I'd like to think more protocols are like very much committed. I know I've having spoken to all the chains that are on the Superchain, like it's app season. Like it is like getting on the ground, being in the trenches, working with app developers, supporting them, working with incubators, supporting them, and like very much going in and going deep and not just like spraying and praying and going broad, right? Like I think that's going to be very exciting to see, like the efforts that are pushed. We have some fantastic teams doing it. It's like, you know, like there's like Sunnies in like ARM, like that's wild. It's, I can't even, that's real. And like Kraken, Base, Unichain, World, like World is doing some awesome stuff with their app. That's a lot of in-media distribution to like 26 million humans, I believe, on day one. You know, in an interoperable future, anyone building an app on the Superchain could potentially just leverage that. That's kind of where we're heading towards. So very, very much excited for this. But I think right now, like if you were to ask me if I would just pick one, it would be that I'm excited for United Ethereum. And I think that's where we're heading towards. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, a very exciting future. And then tell people where they can find you online, where they can find you on chain.
I might not tell you where you can find me on chain because that's been a little rough.
Wallet sniping.
Binji _X on Twitter. I'm very active. At Binji on Farcaster. I am very active. And Binji.eth on one of the wallets that probably aren't as bad. But yeah, enjoy. Let me know if you have any advice on how I can be better.
Perfect. Well, everyone, go obviously follow Binji. Go get involved with the Superchain, and definitely go keep abreast of everything that's going on there. And Sunnies soon. When Sunnies, we've been saying.
Soon. Thank you so much.
But everyone, let's continue building the future of on chain, and let's keep doing it.